Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Financial Fluency. Today, I am here with Nicole Lewis-Keeber from Nicole Lewis-Keeber Coaching. Hi, Nicole. How are you doing?
Hey there. Doing well.
It is so nice to talk to you again.
You too. I'm excited to have this time with each other.
Yeah, so we had a talk a little while ago, not on the show, outside of the show. And so I know a little bit about you and what you do, but could you explain to the audience what it is you do right now?
Sure. I have an 18-year history as a therapist, and I leapt from that burnt-out crispy therapy position into my world now, which is as a coach. And the main focus that I have right now is for women in business, and it's around money and mindset and having a loving relationship with your business.
That sounds good. Yeah, I think a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with their businesses.
Well, I mean, I certainly had a love-hate with all the jobs I had, and I certainly found myself when I was in a position to be in business for myself that I defaulted into those toxic relationships and abused myself. So I know of what I speak. I really do.
Yeah. So what made you decide to leave being a therapist and move into being a coach?
You know, I think it just came down to 18 years of working with people who are in a problematic situation. You know, they're seeing you because they have to. Someone told them that they needed to. They're in crises all the time. The level of insight is growing, and that becomes to be very tiring, after a while. And I often felt like I was working harder than my clients because of that dynamic that was set up. And the end of my career before I transitioned over into a coaching practice is I was a clinical supervisor at our local methadone clinic for 3 years. So it was quite a very high stress environment with a lot of very low perks. And as I learned as a money mindset coach is I had defaulted into being told what I could earn as a social worker. So not only was it this high stress environment, I was also not getting paid well. I never even questioned it, because in school they say, hey, as a social worker, you're going to make this amount of money. When you apply for a job, they tell you what they're willing to pay you. You just get stuck in that place. And I never questioned it. So low pay and high burnout. So I needed to go.
I think that is such a problem in so many positions like that, where it's a position that's so important and that can make an enormous difference for somebody's life, but the pay is so low. Teaching, social work, I mean, there are so many important positions like that where you have a huge influence over somebody's life. And for some reason, our society just doesn't value it enough to pay well.
No, they don't value it. The system is set up against you. And I was indoctrinated into that way of thinking that when you go to school, they tell you what you can make. When you apply for the job, they tell you what they'll pay you. And you take a vow of poverty without even realizing it because you want to help people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think of that too with that. My girls have disabilities, so we have habilitation and respite workers, and we found it really difficult to keep the best ones because the best ones usually are going through a master's program or something to be trained for a specialization, because my kids with autism, a lot of it's ABA therapy, which is one of the better paid areas, but not for doing the one-on-one work. It's for supervising other people. People who are actually working one-on-one with people with disabilities get paid very poorly. And it's a real problem.
It's a real problem. It's a big problem. It's a systemic problem.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I also see that a lot of women who've been through situations like I have, leaving the workforce because of needing to care for somebody, that's a hard place to be put in as well, because you feel like if you can't work in the traditional 9-to-5 type jobs, there's a lot of questioning of like, what is my time worth? We don't get paid for the hardest work we do, which is caregiving often, if you have a high needs individual.
Right.
So taking the work that you maybe did for a job and figuring out how to turn that into coaching or consulting or writing books or, whatever you're trying to do from home on your own time to make your schedule around the caregiving needs. Yeah, that can be a difficult one too.
Yeah, it's a difficult transition. When you go from a place of working for someone else, You believe in the process and the mission and you're there for a reason, but it's a whole different ball of wax when you go out into business for yourself. And all of a sudden here you are having to put a price tag on your time, sell yourself instead of what your position was. You are literally selling yourself at that point. And that just brings up all of the crap, all of the triggers from past experiences. What does it mean to value my time? If people are always saying, get paid what you're worth. I don't like that term because I feel like we're priceless. It's really hard to put a worth or a price tag on us. So I teach my clients to really figure out what they want and charge for their services in a way that is congruent with the vision for their business. I don't like it when people tag worth on us in that way.
Well, it's such a ambiguous term too.
Yeah, because
and the thing that we provide has to be worth that amount to the person receiving it too. So, even if you are extremely worthwhile individual, if what you're offering doesn't have a high worth to the person you're giving it to, that's a hard thing too.
Right. And we're indoctrinated into a system where if you're a caregiver, if you're a helper, if you're service oriented, that you should do this for low pay because you are doing this out of the kindness of your heart or, and so there's that kind of weird dysfunction between being a healer and a service person and what people think that should be paid, what you should be paid. And you can be an amazing caregiver and still garner a salary or prices that are competitive. I don't think you need to be a healer and be poor. There's this weird kind of like systemic thing about if you're a healer you can't charge anything. It's weird.
Yeah. So how do you help people with all of this? Well,
because of my therapy background, of course I see things maybe other people don't. And so what I started doing is I started working with my clients around mindset with money. And so we would look at their paradigm from their family history. Like, how did I grow up in relationship to money? What did my family think? What decade did I grow up in? I grew up in the 80s, under Gorbachev and Dynasty and, Knots Landing. So my peripheral vision about money and all that stuff was kind of skewed by how I grew up. And all those things really do make a difference when it comes down to how you value yourself and what you think is possible. So what we do is we really kind of break down those paradigms and find the underlying triggers to holding yourself back when it comes to money. And there are a lot of them. There's family, there's experiences that you've had in the past. And so what I began to see is it wasn't about the money, because it never is, right? It's never about the money. The money was just an entryway into deeper personal development and deeper understanding. And because of my therapy background, I began to see that the women I was working with had an overarching experience when it came to having traumatic events in their history. And so their trauma was showing up in their money and in their business, which was quite shocking to them because these are powerhouse people. These are people who have been in therapy. They thought they dealt with all that. But when you go into business for yourself, this, it is a crash course in personal development, right? It's a high dive into personal development, and all their stuff came up. All of those triggers about being seen as a businesswoman or being seen as someone who's asking for you to pay me for this thing would trigger their trauma. And so they would pull back. They would give away their services for free. They would discount. They would, step back and let other people make decisions for them, even though it was on their own business. So I saw that pattern begin to develop, and it drove me crazy.
Well, and statistically, when we think about it, 1 in 3 women experience sexual violence at some point in their life. So that is a lot. And then the reasons that women may leave jobs can be traumatic sometimes too, that leave the workforce to work for themselves. So does everyone that you work with work for themselves?
Yes.
For the most part? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say 99%. I have a male client right now who's an inventor and we're working with him on his blocks. But even him, when it comes down to it, it all boils down to not feeling safe, and there's nothing more triggering than to say, I created this idea and this thing, and now I want to put it out into the marketplace for people to critique and purchase or not purchase, they're buying into my dream. That is highly triggering.
Or rejecting it.
Or rejecting it. So
Yeah.
if you have that, that trigger to a rejection or feeling unsafe when you are seen or being viewed by people in the different light, he has the same type of experience, really. But
yeah, it's not solely women. It just tends to be more often women. I mean, there are plenty of stories of boys, all the church priest things and coaches, and there are a lot of it can affect both men and women. I feel like for men it tends to be younger boys more often than adult men, but that's not necessarily even true. But the statistics definitely higher for women, and I do feel like right now I'm trying to remember the numbers that I read recently, but it was the number of women starting their own businesses, and it was being celebrated and lauded. And on the one hand, I think it's amazing that we have this option now, because previously, for those of us who left the traditional workforce, we were kind of out of luck. We were stuck. Maybe we could clean houses for people, our neighbors, or maybe we could do some like stuffing envelope kind of jobs. But before the internet allowing us to take the skills we've learned throughout our lives and directly sell them to people, we had to have some middleman type company that would employ us to be able to be paid for our skills. So on the one hand, it's amazing that we have this option because we might have had nothing. But on the other hand, that's a lot of people not getting the security of a regular paycheck, not having their taxes taken care of, not getting any kind of benefits, not having maternity leave when you need it, or even, being able to access the family protections for people who do have caregiving needs. Yeah. We're contractors, there's no boss to give us vacation time, paid vacation, and there's no boss to give us a raise. That's all up to us now, and our taxes and our fees and our licensure. And it puts so much more responsibility on the individual with fewer safeguards. It
does. It does. Yeah. And ain't that funny how a statistic can be skewed one way or the other? So, someone else is patting themselves on the back because they have created this opportunity for women to become entrepreneurial, and that women are, flooding into the entrepreneurial world, more so than ever. Mm-hmm. Well, if you flip that over, it's, and look at it from a different way, it's like, yeah, they're having to do this because, the situation that they're in requires them to be more flexible, or they can't create the type of wealth that they want working for some other person. And so you could look at that statistic in two ways, is that it's growth and it's wonderful, but it's also necessity, and it comes with all its new challenges, right? So yeah, I get you.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of an inventor, I was having a conversation a while ago with someone I know who worked for a big company. Here in Flagstaff, one of the main employers is Gore Industries. Do you know about Gore-Tex? And so they do both medical devices and the fibers, for the sub-zero temperature camping gear, stuff like that. And it was someone who had done things that ended up in patents for Gore, which obviously was great, and they took great care of them, but they have no ownership of any of their own. Like, while they work for Gore, anything they invent is under their patents, and they don't, if they leave, they have no connection with the patents. So it was this kind of like, do I at some point leave so I can have my own, but they also take really good care of me and I get stock options, and these kind of weighing of long-term owning a patent of that level and that type might be far more profitable than an entire lifespan of working a job, So, but at the same time, you don't get the paycheck and the security, and it's all on you to make it happen.
Well, they call it golden handcuffs for a reason, right?
Yeah. Though honestly, they're not as gold for women. They're more like brass.
They really, they are really not. They really aren't. And, in the background that I come from, working, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and, our agencies were routinely directed by men, but everybody else was a female employee, and that director could be pulling in, it's nonprofit, be pulling in, $100K, and, we're all working for $25,000 a year. So, I mean, the discrepancy is pretty much, across the board. And when you look at it, the women who are creating their own businesses, you're right, there's not that security. And our system is not set up to support small business. It is not set up to support people who are moving into this freer market. It's still set up in an old way. I mean, I'm personally being penalized for being an employee, my own employee right now, from a medical health standpoint, from a benefit standpoint. I'm being penalized for this, come on. So yes, from a systemic situation, it definitely needs to change, and it does not favor women at all.
Yeah. And not to get too political here, but personally, because of what I've seen of the Medicaid system with my own kids, because my kids are in long-term care because they both have what are considered lifelong disabilities.
Yeah.
When my oldest daughter was first diagnosed with autism, before we knew what it was, we had a individual family policy. This is 2010. So before the ACA came into effect, it never occurred to me to read through every single exclusion. I would never have realized until we started the autism testing that we had an autism exclusion on our individual family policy. All we could have is an individual family policy because we were mostly self-employed at the time. I'm now fully self-employed. Which meant everything to do with autism, all the diagnostic, all the testing, everything we had to pay out of pocket. And then it took quite a while for her to actually get into the roles of Medicaid and on the All-Tech system, which is the Arizona long-term care system. But once it did, it was incredible. I did not even see a bill. She needed something, like if she got referred to a specialist, the neurologist, the EKGs, EEGs, all those tests that she needed, I never saw a bill. Whereas everything up to that point, while we were doing all the diagnostics and stuff, I would get triple billed for so many things. Like we had several ER moments of really, desperate health crisis because she has both the white blood cell disorder and autism and migraines, and we didn't quite know what was what, and she had very odd scans on her. She has too much fluid on her optic nerves, and she has a lot of odd things that didn't add up at first. And so I would get a bill from the hospital physician, I would get a bill from the anesthesiologist, I would get a bill from the ER, and they would all say that they were sending them to my insurance on my behalf, but that I was still had to pay, and then I would wait. And I had two things sent to collections, not because I was unwilling to pay them. It was because I got confused, which so I wait till it comes back from the insurance, right? And then the insurance negotiates it down for me, but we had a $5,500 each deductible, 11,000 family deductible, which we hit every year for 3 years in a row.
Of course.
So our out of pocket was at least 11,000, and that didn't even cover the ABA therapy because at that time it was not considered medically necessary.
No.
By now it is, but so we had our first year, we had $60,000 in medical deductions.
Isn't that ridiculous?
I know.
And honestly, the fact that it changes from state to state, I used to do, when I needed to take a step back from doing direct practice, sometimes I would go behind the scenes, and I worked for a state, I won't say what state it was, doing reviews for disabled, children who had disabilities. And the reviews that I did were for families that they didn't qualify for Medicaid because they made too much money. Okay. But this service was to get them qualified so that they could still have all the benefits that a child would get through that state Medicaid program, even though their parents, both had pretty decent incomes, because when it comes down to it, you could spend $60,000, someone's entire salary on, services. So luckily,
so the kids didn't qualify. They must not have had long-term, because we didn't qualify, our family didn't qualify for SSI or anything. But once they were determined to have a long-term, lifelong condition,
it's different.
It's different by state by state.
State by state.
Okay.
So in this state, you had to go through this entire process of proving that your child had a lifelong disability that was not going to change, and that required a skilled level of care, a level of care that required, and so they'd have to go through this whole process. But once they got approved, it was helpful because, now they had the burden lifted off of them to be able to have all their, services paid for, and not fight with their private insurance. And it filled that gap. Well, that was one state. Flip side, I have a friend in another state who has a child the exact same lifetime, lifelong disabilities that will always require care, and her state doesn't have that. So you either have Medicaid or you have private insurance. And so she's constantly fighting and the insurance company, and they are constantly on the brink of losing their home. So to me, the fact that there's such a discrepancy from state to state to state is insane. This is insane.
Well, seeing what Medicaid can be like, I like to think of that as the closest we have to universal health care, that and Medicare. But, so my parents both have Medicare, but then there are gaps in Medicare.
Yeah.
But still, overall, it makes me just feel like, oh, how much simpler would all of our lives be if we didn't have to figure out insurance either job by job or going through these, right now, at least the marketplaces, ACA did help us because it simplified things and it made it so that our family couldn't be refused for prior, what do they call it? Prior conditions?
Pre-existing,
pre-existing conditions. Because that was another thing was when we tried to move insurance, Tallulah obviously had a pre-existing condition. She was born with her white blood cell disorder, even though it wasn't diagnosed until she was almost 3. And she was, had regressive autism, which was apparent when she was about 18 months old. And so it just, the stress of going through the medical stuff. I mean, I don't know if it would have been better if we'd had an employer with really good insurance. Would we have been more taken care of? I don't know.
I don't know, because that can change from year to year. You can have really great insurance and then it can take an absolute stinking nosedive. So
yeah, that's true.
It's really hard to say. So, I mean, when you think about all of the challenges that are there for us as women, particularly in the workforce and in a situation of trying to create our own financial freedom, which I believe in. I don't want one more woman who has had a traumatic event in their life not to have all the good stuff, to not be able to step into her business and feel confident and not triggered, to be able to make the money that she wants and to be able to be as visible in her business as she wants without feeling afraid. I want them to have the good stuff too. I don't want it to be just for a small segment of people. And so that's why it's my mission, and I work really hard with my clients to help get them through those triggers and those trauma events that come back up in their business so they don't quit, and so that they stay with it, and so that they can move towards what is very possible in this world of creating your own financial destiny, if you want to call it that. But there's so many challenges that come up. It's so easy to give up, and it's so easy to get diverted from that. So it's kind of, particularly now, if I had this mission before this year, for real, it's taken it to a whole nother level.
Well, I have to be honest, as someone who has personally experienced physical, sexual, and violent trauma in my life, I have felt extremely triggered this past year, both going through the U.S. election and our president being elected and the immediate things that happen. And I feel fearful for my kids in school. I feel fearful for their education. I feel fearful about losing ACA because while it's not as good as I want, it's better than before. It's better than nothing. I feel like even if you haven't had a personal physical trauma, like your children having medical trauma or being afraid of your children losing benefits when they need it, or your spouse or your parents, that's traumatic for you too. I mean, just the weight of the worry of what happens, especially if you are the sole breadwinner for your family, if you're the breadwinner.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, when you think about trauma, just in general, it's a lack of feeling safe and knowing what's going to happen. It's lack of feeling safe. It's having something happen that was unexpected that then kind of rocks your world as far as feeling that you know what's going to happen next and that you can predict and that there's certainty. And there is no certainty right now in one damn thing. And if you have these triggers, which I do too, I have survived, childhood abuse and physical and domestic abuse. And when you think about it, it literally does feel every day that you get a new story or a new example as to how and why the current government structure is not only not supporting me, but it feels like they're coming after me, and so that is highly triggering, and my clients are highly triggered. It's just bringing up all that trauma all over. There's a re-traumatization of women across this country that is astounding to me, and I see it in all of my clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And an interesting thing too, it's a little off to the side, but since we talked about social work and stuff, I did go through a criminal trial against my abuser when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so re-traumatizing. That
Mm-hmm.
was so hard. Like going through it, was I 19 when we started the trial? I think I was 18 when we brought charges. It took 3 years to do the whole trial to come full circle and get a sentence. And I was like, I cannot believe any 5 or 6-year-old child could go through this. It was so rough and so hard. And I was just like, I'm an adult when I was going through it. But the way you're treated and talked to, the way you're asked questions, the way your privacy is just absolutely pried into and laid open for everyone to see. And the fact that you have to repeat the words that when my abuse started, I didn't even know, I didn't have those words. I didn't know what I didn't even know how to describe what was happening.
Yeah, you didn't have language for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and to have to say it in the room with him staring at me, I was like, what little kid could manage this?
The system is broken. I mean, when it comes down to women, well, anyone who's been through a situation where they've been a victim, the system is set up to, they're innocent until proven guilty. So we have to go through the process of proving it with our soul, our spirit, we have to reprove our trauma, which means we have to re-experience our trauma. We have to be re-traumatized in order to prove it. But it's a system that does not work.
And I don't think innocent till proven guilty is a bad thing per se,
no.
But it does mean the accuser is lying until they prove that they have told the truth. It's the presumption of the innocence of the person being accused means that it's all the weight of proof is on the person who has been attacked.
It's quite shocking. I mean, it's quite shocking.
So
really
as this relates to money, because I think it does really intensely, because money is our system of value in this culture. It shows what we put importance and on. And so if we feel damaged and broken and aren't valuing ourselves enough, how do you help women deal with that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm just there to support them and to say, hey, this is what's going on. Because a lot of times, they don't really know that they're being re-traumatized, or they don't know that they have a trauma from their past that they thought they dealt with that was now popping up. They just know that when they have to go to a networking event, they want to throw up. They just know that when they have someone says, do a Facebook Live video to talk about what you do, they all of a sudden feel unsafe, or they feel like they can't do it. And so they don't. And so they don't step up and out into their brilliance, really, to show the world what they can do, because they feel unsafe, but they don't really know that. So it is my job to call it out, to make it safe and help them get through that, so that they don't go out of business over a traumatic event that they had in the past, because that makes me crazy. So I work with them. I have a system that I take them through, where we start very easily by looking just at their money. We literally look at their money and we see what comes up for them. So we start just very black and white. Then we work on the emotions. Then we look at, okay, well, where could these have come from? How are they triggering you now? Where are they holding you back? And so we go through this entire process of helping them work through and be able to see, okay, I'm just triggered right now. That just sounds awful, but going into a networking event, it feels unsafe. I'm safe, I'm an adult, I'm okay. So they learn to speak to that inner voice, that inner kiddo that's triggered by this event and still is. And so that little 7-year-old is not driving the bus and driving their business off the cliff, because that's what begins to happen. So I work with them through all of these things, and things change because they gather knowledge, mastery, and they can really start to manage those inner voices that feel unsafe, and really partner with them to help them feel a part of, and they kind of grow that little kid up a little bit and say, we're good. You don't have to worry about this. And it's quite amazing what happens. But as I told you earlier, I wanted to make sure I made this point. One of the other things that I saw with myself and with my clients is that me and my clients, we were using our businesses to abuse ourselves. which is fascinating because when you've had traumatic events or abusive relationships or toxic relationships, if you don't set up your business as a relationship with intention, you are going to default into toxic ways of relating to your business. You are going to beat yourself up with it. You're going to be your own mean boss. And at the end of the day, you're going to feel abused, and you will be the one who did it to yourself because you have done this. It's your business. And so once I was able to identify that I was doing that and began to see my clients doing the same thing, I worked with them to help them say, okay, this is a relationship that you have entered into. Your business is a relationship. How can I connect you to it? How can we get you in a relationship with it that's positive and encouraging and feels safe and secure? So we worked through that as well because they did not realize that they were defaulting into toxic behaviors.
That's interesting. As you're saying that, I was thinking, how do we date our business? Have positive, how do we take care of it and have it take care of us?
Yeah. Well, I have a whole process that I take them through that. We literally create a persona of their business. I have them write love letters to their business. I have them write letters to themselves from there. It's so funny how we go through this, but it really helps them feel solid and secure in, this is my business and we're in this together, and this is what we will put up with, this is what we'll not put up with. And so taking them through that process, even though it's kind of lighthearted and fun, it really connects them deeply in a deeper way to their business, so that they see, hey, I'm in a relationship with my business. I'm in a relationship with my money. I'm in a relationship with my inner critic. I'm in a relationship with the world around me, social media, family. And that if I don't set an intention in this relationship and understand that I am in it, I'm going to default. And I'm going to be the one who pays the price for that default. So
that's an interesting approach. I like that.
It's been a fascinating experience, that is for sure. And so when you pull that all together with money, and being in a business that you love, and rather than in a business that feels like a mean, abusive boss, we have to take responsibility and say, I'm the one who set up this business this way. So what can I do to fix this? And I had a friend who I was laughing, he's a fellow coach, and we were kind of giggling about this when I came to this big aha last year. And she started to laugh, and she said, you know what? She's like, I don't even have a chair to sit in that's not broken. And I said, oh my God. I said, if you worked for a boss who didn't give you, much less an office, a desk, but a chair that was broken, I said, you would quit. You'd report them to OSHA. But she was perfectly willing to set up a situation for herself and her business where she didn't even have a chair to sit in that was not broken.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think especially at the beginning of trying to start a business, a lot of times we put in, really long hours for little to no pay for quite some time.
Or we try to pretend like we're not in business because we don't want to inconvenience anyone. Not take up space, not ask for you to buy into my dream, not ask for you to not have to have dinner tonight. Instead of, we're like, nothing to see over here. I'm just building a business. I'm just building like a company over here, but don't worry. So, take up space. It's hard though.
Yeah. Actually, I have to admit, once I designated this room my office in our house, I love it. It's the only place that's all mine where I shut the door. There's no reason for anyone to come in here, except to interrupt me, to come get me. But nothing in here belongs to anybody else. It's just my stuff, and I love it.
Good for you.
It made a big difference. Instead of it being like a corner of my bedroom, or it being, the kitchen table, some nondescript place that wasn't really an office.
It's a good place to start. And when you think about having a relationship with your business needs space. It needs room. It needs to be in a place with you to relate. And, yeah.
Yeah. And my problem with the kitchen table was then I always got distracted by all the stuff that needs to be done in my house that I shouldn't be working on during business hours. I should leave that for other times and not do it all myself, because I'm not the only working one just because I work at home.
Absolutely. I think we have to take those things seriously. Giving yourself that space created a whole new world for you, right? And you actually love it. Like, you love being in your space with your business. Like, this is my place.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Though my family calls it my hole because
your
it's
whole,
so my window's at ground level. It's downstairs, and that we have like a tri-level house, so I
mm-hmm,
can see into the backyard, but at ground level. So I'm kind of below everyone, but it's quieter and cooler
mm-hmm,
here, and yeah,
yeah.
but
Well, and if you struggle with your value or your worth, and you struggle with feeling safe, and you struggle with someone who's abused your power, we're very, very likely to recreate that in our business and our money, and just really struggle to have that financial freedom and wealth that we are so capable of creating. And that can't happen. That can't happen. It needs to stop happening.
So do you mostly work one-on-one with your clients, or do you have group programs? What do you offer?
I do. I do a lot of one-on-one work because of the sensitive nature of what I do. I always say it's not about the money. We're going to start with the money, but it's not always just about the money. But what I found is that some people were not able to work with me because of the price point, and I really didn't want. That doesn't align with my mission to leave people behind. So I created an online program that is modular, that's self-study, that is at a price point that's easier to reach, for people who can't work with me one-on-one. And I was really worried about that because being a therapist and I have a license to protect, I can't just be willy-nilly about stuff. And I really worried about that. So I took 5 of my one-on-one clients that I had worked with, and they went through the modules in the program again, and they said, this is solid, it's good, it's what you taught us, it has integrity, they'll be okay. And so that made me feel so much better. So I do have this online program, but I also have the one-on-one coaching that I do.
What's the program called?
The online program is the Transformational Wealth Program. Okay. And my one-on-one coaching is called the Wealth, Worth, and Wisdom Coaching Program.
What?
Wealth, worth, and wisdom.
The triple W's.
Yes, it's your wealth, it's your worth, and your wisdom as you learn, to partner with your business in a different way.
Well, that sounds great. And we will definitely put some links in the show notes to all of those, to your website and to your programs.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for talking to us about all of this stuff today. I think it's very important and timely right now.
It is. Sometimes it's hard to have these conversations, but we need to have them if we're going to take the steps that we need to take to really step up.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what you're speaking to applies to a lot of the people that I've talked to, and a lot of people in my audience who've emailed at different times and brought up some of these things. Yeah. Just one last situation that I'm thinking of is, in the past year, I've had a number of people contact me in the process of leaving a difficult marriage and starting over and trying to figure out how to do it. To feel like they're completely hitting reset and starting over on their own. And that's such an important and difficult time for women too, because I feel like a lot of times in a marriage, if somebody has to give up a wage to stay home for some reason for any amount of time, it always makes sense for the woman, unless the woman's, say, a surgeon and the husband is a lower paying job. Most cases that I've come across, it's usually the woman who's given up some time, and then you've really compromised your career trajectory and choices.
You really have. Yeah. And that is very true. And one of the women I worked with the fall in love with your business kind of overarching theme, that's what she wanted to focus on. She said, I left an abusive relationship. I left it only to recreate that in my business. I began to abuse myself in my business. And so I think it's very important to have that level of understanding, and to have people who can, coach you, cheer you on, and make a safe space for you to say, this is okay. You're safe. I got you. We're going to get through this, because this is unfortunately a normal circumstance, but people get through it, and you will too.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that last one out there, because I feel like there are quite a few circumstances in which people may find themselves who are listening to this and may want to seek Nicole's help or look into her group program or self-study program. And it sounds fantastic. So thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.